All right. Hi, this is Wendy Holtmark. I'm here with Karan Froom. Really excited to have you as a guest, Karen. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good.
Yeah,
It's great to have you.
thanks.
I'm just waiting a moment for the feed to flow through on LinkedIn and on Facebook. We'll just give that a second. But so you, Karen, of course, are based in Ohio. So how's it going over there?
Well, it's our typical spring where it's 81 day and 32 the next.
Yeah.
I think it's snow today, but Sunday was beautiful. So you never know around here.
Yeah, I'm on the North Shore of Massachusetts, and it's been a slow go this spring. It feels like it like the leaves are just starting to come out, but it's taken a while.
Yeah. Well, they say in Ohio, if you don't like the weather, just wait. It will change. So
Yeah,
maybe
they,
we'll
they,
get spring again this weekend. I don't know.
they say that here too.
Yeah.
I guess it's just a function of weather. It's always changing, which is a great segue to all things change. So welcome, folks. I am Wendy Holtmark. I'm a coach who helps women lead change, and I in this forum, All Things Change, I have a conversation with women who are leading in a changing world. And I'm very excited to have with us today Karan Froom, who is Director of Transformational Change Management at Clorox. And I've had a few lovely conversations with Karen, and we are gathered here today to talk about vulnerability and leadership, a topic that Karen and I are both passionate about. Um, and it's a great thing to focus on in this context, because I do want to say that these conversations are really just that. And so in some ways this is a place for us to be vulnerable too, Karen,
Right.
just about not knowing all the answers. It's perfectly okay for us to share our experiences, to wonder things together, and to be a little bit vulnerable. And for those of you who are joining us live, very happy to hear from you in the chat. If you want to say hi, where you're joining from, any questions that come into your mind, or any comments that you want to share with us, I'll be peeking at that throughout our time. So, Karen, welcome.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here and have this conversation with you today.
Yeah, it's such a great topic, and I'm so glad that vulnerability and leadership is even on people's radars at this point, because I think we both know that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, people would have probably just shrugged and said, I don't know why we're talking about this.
Yeah, exactly. I do think even in the day we're in today with the pandemic, have going through that, I think a lot of things changed, over the last 2 years and how we look at leadership and management in this new environment of remote working and unprecedented times, that we're going through as a world.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think this topic is very timely.
Yeah. I totally agree, and I think that what the pandemic has done is there are topics that were becoming important, and then the pandemic happened, and it really just like cemented the importance of those things. And vulnerability and leadership, I think, is certainly one of them. So tell me why vulnerability as a leader is so important to you.
Yeah, as I reflect over my career, the last 25, 30 years now, it's gone by really fast. I've really thought about, how have I evolved as a manager, as a leader of people. And one of the things I realized in my later part of my career that I've become more open, and more I guess, in my own skin, and who I represent both at home and in my work life. And I kind of started questioning, well, why, why have I made that evolution over these years, and what really, caused that? And for me, I think, some of it comes with time and age and experience, but also some of it is just being comfortable in your own skin, and being confident in the work that you're doing. But I think, over the last couple of years, the topic of vulnerability has just been out there, right? In the media, Brene Brown has written her books around it, and there's been a lot of TED Talks about it. And I think for me, it was just a way of tying together, my whole person, bringing my whole person to work, and not that I have to have a work persona and a home persona. And I think all of those lines got blurred, when the pandemic happened, because now we're in our homes all day long, but we're actually interacting with people from work. And what does that look like now? What does it look like when I'm sitting on my couch with my two dogs in my lap, trying to run a big meeting, when I sprained my ankle and I couldn't come up to my home office, So how do I lead in that format? And I think it showed a different side of all of us, during the pandemic, and how we can still manage through others, and being a little more our true selves.
Mm. Yeah, I observe that as well. And one thing I'm picking up on is, the lines got blurred, you said. And it makes me think how, maybe those lines were a little bit artificial and tiring, and without us really fully realizing it.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I found as I've gotten older, I've gotten less mature at work, which I like to have fun. And I think people, I don't know who's on this listening right now. If you're out there and you work on my team, maybe you can vouch for me. I enjoy laughing at work and joking and playing practical jokes and things like that. And I think I probably wouldn't have done that 15 years ago, 20 years ago, depending on the role I was at, working in a bank, that environment, or in a large company, where I didn't feel like I could be myself, really in a job, and still be respected as a leader, who produces results, right?
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes you can look at people like that and think they're not taking their job seriously, per se.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's understandable that at earlier stages of our career, when we're trying to really build credibility, that our instinct might be, well, I need to be really serious and I need to, stay in this box right now in order to be taken seriously. But actually a little bit of softening of those edges and blurring of those lines can really, really help build some trust.
Yeah, I know you and I talked about this, earlier, around, as a younger woman in business and as a leader. I know for myself, maybe I've been blessed with good genes, but some people tell me I look younger than my age, which is, it's a nice thing now that I'm older, but it wasn't such a great thing when I was younger, because people didn't always take me seriously. And I think I had to feel like I had to show that I knew everything. I was the expert. I, had to be serious. I couldn't act young or act my age, because it wasn't taken seriously at the time. And you kind of grow into that, and you feel like, okay, well, this is how I have to be at work, because in order to be taken seriously, I have to, kind of hide my true self and become this person, this persona that I think I need to have, in order to be taken seriously.
Mhm.
And fortunately, I think I want to share with younger women who might be listening, as you gain more experience and as you age a little bit more, I think you can let your hair down more. I'm definitely less mature now in my older years than I was, in my 20s and 30s. In I wish that I could have learned that lesson earlier in my career, because I think I would have been a better leader.
Mhm.
I think when you try to, um, you know, act like you know everything, and you have that persona that you have to present, that you're the expert because that's what people are expecting of you, that can come across as, probably not the way you want to be represented. Um, and I'm fortunate to have friends in my life that worked for me 20 years ago, and they tell stories, and it's pretty funny. They'll quote me and say some of the funny stories and things that I said when I was a leader back then, and they make sure that I don't forget. How far I've come, I guess, but there's some funny stories out there that, and things that I said that I cringe when I hear. But
Yeah.
that was where I was at the time, and where I thought I needed to be to, I had a team of 30 people when I was like 32, 33 at a large bank. And,
Mhm.
I knew what I was doing, but I felt like I had to really, come across, probably even more mature than I was really.
Yeah, yeah. That burden of being the expert in addition to leading people,
Yeah.
through the choppy waters of, modern work life that's a huge burden that we place on ourselves really unnecessarily in a lot of ways. Of course, having some, your expertise and is important, but it's not something we have to brandish all the time.
Yeah, I think we have to remember that it's okay to ask for help and say you don't
Mhm.
know something. So when you think about vulnerability, I think that's a lot what it goes down to, is to say, hey, I'm not the expert. I may be in this role because of my experience or, the work I've done in the past, but I know that I don't bring, all the answers to the table. And I
Mhm.
think as soon as I learned that lesson, probably in my late 30s, I started surrounding myself with people who were smarter than me, who filled the gaps that I have as a leader, and being self-aware, where your gaps are.
Yeah.
I know I'm not a tactical person. I'm not a detail person, but I surround myself with people who are, and they are really valuable to me, on my team. I also, ask my team, hey, what's the best answer here? Give me some ideas of where we should go. I don't know. I'm stumped. I mean, it's okay as a leader to say, hey, I need help. You don't have to know everything in your role. And I think sometimes we as women, especially, feel like we have to show that we are strong and we're capable and we have all the answers, when in reality, the right answer is using your resources, and finding people to help you on your journey.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's right. And so there's a couple of levels then, or layers to this question of vulnerability. There's the blurring of your personal and your professional, but there's also just, exposing yourself as somebody who doesn't have all the answers and who has expertise, but doesn't have expertise in every darn thing. And so, needing to really, um, be comfortable with, asking for that help.
Yeah, and it does take a little bit of letting your pride go a little and lowering your ego. I know in my earlier career, I was kind of tied up in job titles, right? I'm a VP, or I'm, whatever it is. And thinking that meant that you should know all the answers because of your actual job title. When the reality was, I think I made more money and I was more successful as a consultant, when I sat outside the bathrooms at, L brands than I ever
Mhm.
did when I was a VP at a bank, or whatever the case was. So I think having the hindsight, as you move forward in your career, to see that the title doesn't really mean anything.
Mm.
It's more, to me, it's more the relationships that you build along the way, and building that network of people that you can carry forward with you as well, from throughout your career. Um, you know, I think I think that goes along with being vulnerable too, and building those relationships, being open to get to know people that you may then want to work with down the line,
Mm.
through your career. There's
Yeah.
comments too.
Yeah. Yeah. So, thanks, Carol. She's shared, she's wondering if being genuine and your true self comes with experience and age, and maybe that's different than being less, being different, see that being different than being less mature. So basically, she's sharing the perspective that, it's not so much that you've become more silly, but you just are more, more true to yourself. And I could see that perspective too. So thanks, Carol, for sharing that.
Yeah, definitely. I probably use the word less mature to mean more comfortable, right?
Yeah.
So in my mind,
Yeah.
because I think when I was in my 20s and 30s, I definitely had in my head, the persona that I needed to be. My mom's maybe listening right now. She was a banker, and I think watching her manage her teams, I felt like I had to act a certain way, in
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
banker, kind of role model.
Yeah.
And, as I did get more comfortable in my own skin, I kind of found my own way, versus modeling what I thought, how my mom's career went, how I thought I should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. That is such a huge factor for all of us. So, let's talk about the impacts you see, through your becoming more vulnerable, asking for help more, and sharing of yourself more. Tell me what you've noticed in terms of your team and the dynamics of it.
I think it all trickles down, right? So during the pandemic, I was with Cardinal Health, and I had a large team of consultants and employees that worked together. Fortunately, we had been together probably about a year before, the pandemic hit and we all had to go remote. But when we started working remotely, we needed to keep that momentum because the project we were on at Cardinal was ramping up very quickly. So we knew this was our peak time of, we need to work together. We needed to be aligned. And so I started a couple things. One was, we had our regular team meetings, and I would ask the questions about, hey, how are you all doing personally? Let's have the conversation about mental health. If you need resources, there's resources. I know people are going through a lot of stress right now. Just having that conversation with the whole team, kind of talking about the elephant in the room. Yes, we had a lot of work to get done, and it was a lot of pressure, but people were struggling. Especially, I had a lot of parents on my team, with young kids who were trying to do homeschool and work. And even I had a woman that just had a baby, so she was going through the whole newborn, time frame. And so starting out with those conversations and then kind of guiding the conversation through our team site, I started posting a question every day that people would answer. And I actually, I told you I would bring the books. I have a couple of the books that I used. One is like the Fabulous Book of Questions here.
Oh.
And you can see how worn it is. I've used it quite a bit. But I would post a question every day on our team site that people would answer. And what that did is it gave people a platform when they met one-on-one, outside of our team meetings and outside of, the normal, within their workday, to have a conversation about, hey, I saw that, you posted that story about your favorite teacher from grade school. And, I liked my, third grade teacher too, whatever it was. And I found that as a leader, if you started having those conversations and opening the door, then one-on-one conversations within your own team could happen where people felt more comfortable sharing, like, oh, hey, Karen mentioned in our team meeting that, we should look for resources on depression, or, or here's a meditation app that I'm using that's helping, so I think just by kind of saying it's okay, and starting those conversations, people then took those things and ran with them internally. And I'll tell you that, yeah, sure, I will. I see the comment here. The book is called The Book of Fabulous Questions by Penelope Frohart, Frohart. So, I think it really gave people permission to then have the conversations. And folks from that team will say that we were one of the strongest teams together after, we've all disbanded now from that project, and a lot of us have left that company and moved on to other things, but people still talk about the bond that they had within that team. And I think those were some of the reasons, not all, but
yeah, it really just helps build connection. And once you have that connection, it becomes easier to have some of the harder conversations that maybe need to happen in a work context or otherwise.
Yeah, and these were people who didn't all report to my company or remote, they were contractors as well. And I wanted to make sure that people felt like, hey, it doesn't matter, if you're an employee of this company or if you're a contractor, we're all in this together. We're all on one team. We're all working towards the same cause. And we're all experiencing this pandemic together, in the crazy way that we are. And, life is not normal. This is not a normal way of working. And this is not, how we thought our lives would go right now. But we're together in this,
Yeah. Karen, there are some people who may want to become more vulnerable, see the benefits of doing that as a leader, but who worry about appropriate boundaries and that they might inadvertently cross one of those. So what are your thoughts on that, and what advice do you have to somebody who might have that concern?
Yeah, I understand that. I think, there's a fine line sometimes if you're sharing something personal. I'll tell you a funny story about my current boss, who is a very focused man who, kind of introverted, comes across not super personable, but funny. One day we were on a Zoom call together, or a Teams call, a bunch of us, and we all had sweatshirts on. It was a Friday and we're all wearing sweatshirts except for him. So he gets on the call and we tease him and we say, hey, where's your sweatshirt? Look, we're all wearing sweatshirts today. Didn't you get the memo? He shut his camera off and disappeared. And we're like, where is he going? He comes back with a sweatshirt on, so just that small, and the funnier part that I really appreciated is he's in California and he wore a Columbus, Ohio sweatshirt that he got.
Oh.
Yeah. So, for me, that was a small gesture and it was a small amount of vulnerability because he kind of let his hair down a little bit and ran and got this sweatshirt and put it on over his button down, where he might be normally a little more buttoned up.
Yeah.
But that's vulnerability. That's a small thing. He kind of made fun of himself a little, not, just like he went in on the joke with us
Yeah.
and he allowed us to tease him about it, and he was comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And so I think when you think about vulnerability, it's not so much like, hey, I'm going to get up here and I'm going to share my life story right now. And you're all going to cringe when you hear it. Like, oh my God, what is she sharing? That's too personal. It's more about just how can you let people into a little bit of your life or your personality? How do you let a little bit of it show? Because even those little things like that to me bonded me closer to my new boss, right? I've been with the company about 8-9 months now. And the fact that he was thoughtful enough to, one, put on the sweatshirt, and two, that it had the name of the city that I live in, whether he did that on purpose or not, I don't know, but it made me feel really good. And it just showed a fun side to him too,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that just taking little baby steps is if you're uncertain of whether, where the line is. And some people, having worked in HR for a number of years, I did work with people who really struggled with that genuinely and maybe took things a little too far with, not malicious intentions. But yeah, just like little baby steps into that, like the gesture you shared of your current bosses, just like little shares about hobbies, interests, movies. Those can all be ways just to build that up. And I think also, if you're unsure but your instinct is to go there, you think it might be helpful, just announce it. I'm about to share something that makes me a little vulnerable. I hope it's okay. And then people will, I think a lot of times give you the benefit of the doubt, even if you've crossed a little bit of a line that that they weren't expecting.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good example. Another one that just came to mind, one of my good friends she's a senior executive in a company, and she just shared with me in one of her big town hall meetings recently, she sang a song.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the song was, but this is someone who I've never imagined would actually get up in front of a big room. She's not a singer, it's not her style. She's actually very professional all the time. And I told her, I said, well, I am so proud of you for going out on a limb and being vulnerable with your team. That I told her, I said, this is really going to make you more approachable within your organization. I mean, she has, I don't know, a couple hundred people reporting to her or under her. And I just thought it was great, and when she told me that, I'm like, what a great gesture. And it was just a fun little thing. And it was just a snippet of a song that kind of went with her speech, I think, that she was sharing. So those are examples. The other one, like I said, it is fun to share if you're comfortable, if you have embarrassing is probably not the right word, but if you have a funny story about yourself, a self, depreciating story that's not too bad, or too embarrassing, that's also a good way to share because it does show that you're human, and that you make mistakes and, it's a vulnerable thing to share with a group of people, but that's another way to step into it without probably offending anyone or getting into trouble with HR, which we don't.
So let's talk about men and vulnerability, because I think that's a really interesting angle to look at it through in the workplace, I guess, in particular. But generally speaking, society conditions men to not show vulnerability, and yet there's so much evidence now that being more vulnerable as a leader is helpful. What are your thoughts on the position that men find themselves in with regard to vulnerability?
Yeah, I think, again, during the pandemic, when we all were working remotely, I know for me personally, I saw a different side of the leaders and the men, my peers, and the leaders in the company. When you're watching them go say, "Oh, I've got to run, I got to pick up my kids from school," or when they turn around and yell at the dog behind them, that's barking. You don't always see that side, and men don't always necessarily let you know that they have these responsibilities, or that they say, or they're cooking dinner, in the meeting, like, "Hey, I've got to cook dinner because my kids have soccer at 6:30, and I'm just going to listen, and I'm back here doing this," and so I think it was nice to see that side of our male colleagues, actually in their home, because they were just like the rest of us, right? They were all working from home and kind of in the same situation. But I also have noticed that I think the younger generation, coming in, the millennials and beyond, my son is a Gen Z. I think they've grown up with strong women leaders and role models and their mothers and those kinds of things, and they have a different respect. And I also think they have a different vulnerability in the workplace. I think maybe their interaction with their peers, that they've grown up with, they do a lot more things together as a group, and do a lot more things online. I'm kind of seeing that they are a little more open, and they talk. I know the ones that I've worked with in the past have talked more about their family life, in the social setting and in a work setting.
Yeah. Well, that's encouraging.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I sometimes think of gender issues, things that are maybe sometimes thought of as disadvantages for women. Actually, I feel like men are deprived of so many things that women get to experience, like vulnerability. And so it's good to hear that maybe the pendulum is swinging a little bit. But let's go to one comment, and then we're going to wrap up, Karen. So Jennifer says, having a leader who is willing to be honest and vulnerable about not having all the answers and about work-life balance, etc., can free us up to focus on working as a team and gives us room to hone our craft. Not having to worry about being in serious work mode all the time can take a lot of stress off of your shoulders. Well said, Jennifer. So thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. Good. All right, Karen. So we're going to wrap up. And if anybody has, any final questions or comments, throw them in the chat now while we're wrapping up. But I'm going to just share some of the takeaways I've picked up on for myself and for the audience, and then I'd love for you to chime in with anything you'd like to add. But some of my main takeaways are that blurring that line between personal and your work persona is really healthy and normal and beneficial to team building and building trust. Loved the idea of just a question a day from that fabulous book of questions. That is literally the name of the book. And it sounds like a great tool. I'm going to take a look at it myself, because I think just, getting in the habit of breaking down, those mini barriers is really, really cool. And just that this is, crosses genders, that, it's beneficial for both men and women to be more vulnerable. And also one of my takeaways was just, starting out, if you're looking to just kind of flex that muscle a little bit more, just taking some baby steps to share a little of yourself. But so many great takeaways, in fact. But what would you like to add or clarify?
Yeah, no, I think you captured most of it. I think for me, it just, like I said, though, one regret I have in my career was just not learning this earlier, and I wish I had just kind of, taken my ego down a bit and got out of my head so much. And, in my 30s and even my early 40s, and just brought more of my whole self to work, because at the end of the day, our titles don't matter. Our salary doesn't matter. It's the relationships that you make with each other and the people that you leave behind is your legacy, with your career. And so I think, I think I burned some bridges when I was younger that I regret a little. And I think now for me, it's more about, how can I make an impact to the individuals that I meet and I work with on a daily basis? And I think being open and honest and vulnerable about that that's how it's done, is just bringing your whole self to your work.
Yeah. Yeah. Very well said. And maybe you can consider it. You had some missteps with that in the early days of your career, but now you're sharing what you've learned, and others will benefit from that, which is great.
I hope so. I don't want people quoting you 10 years in your career and things that you said back in the day. It's kind of funny. I still laugh at it. It's pretty funny, but yeah. Don't do what I did.
Yeah, being able to just laugh at ourselves is a huge part of it. And take the
exactly.
load off for sure.
Exactly.
Virginia, thank you for posting the link for that book. And I'm sure the authors of the book thank you as well. And then Megan, just acknowledging, you said really well said about the titles and the hierarchy. And thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed this discussion, Megan, and everybody. Thank you for joining. I'm going to go ahead and sign off now. And Karan Froom, thank you again once more. Appreciate your time with us here today.
This was fun. Thank you.